Hi everyone, this is a remote viewing 5-year forecast for 3 new cryptocurrencies that we are calling CICO 21, 22, and 23. Some are inexpensive and others are slightly more costly than most of the currencies featured in our previous forecasts. But getting involved in any shouldn't break the bank for most people. We have done a great many studies on cryptocurrencies that we hoped would survive and thrive into the future. And in general, we have found out that most of them do not do well in the long run in terms of adoption. We decided to look at 3 cryptocurrencies this month that have a range of different functions, and fundamentally, they perform differently over the 5-year duration of our forecasts. CICO stands for Contemporary Investigations of Cryptocurrency Opportunities. Again, the purpose of our CICO forecast is to attempt to use remote viewing in the context of our economic forecasting methods to determine the likelihood that a cryptocurrency will survive and thrive into the future. We are trying to focus on cryptocurrencies where their initial cost per coin is generally small, and the potential for growth is significant. We offer our CICO forecasts free to the public to watch as videos on YouTube, but the real name of the currency in the forecast has been changed so that the name referenced in the video is fictional. Potential investors can watch the forecast to see if they want to purchase the actual identity of the currency during the forecast period. While we have begun our CICO forecasts by publishing results for coins for which we obtained positive results, we now publish a wider range of forecasts. We moved to something that is more like a subscription model, where those people who purchased one of our CICO forecasts, identities, also get identities from other CICO forecasts that are available and current through the end of the year 2021. There is no extra cost for this. CICO forecasts typically are for 5 or more years. We sometimes update some of our forecasts, which usually extends the forecast further into the future. Publishing a wider range of forecasts allow us to share our results that are not good, which theoretically allows people to dump currencies from their portfolios that look like they will not survive. But again, in our research, some currencies did come back with strong and positive results. Luckily for us, one of those currencies we explored this month yielded positive results. For these CICO studies, we normally probe for adoption, and that is whether a significant number of people and institutions start to use the currency. The theory is that if the currency survives and people use the currency, then that would make it a good investment. So, let me outline what we did with this study for CICO 21, 22, and 23. This experimental design has 2 parts for the target, which is what the viewers are supposed to perceive. The first is known now, and that is a base surface that has unique topographical elements. The second part of the target is made up of additional elements that are added to the target after the end of the forecast period. We have a video on our website on the Farsight forecasting method that was used for this study, and that video describes how this all works. All of the viewers described the currently verifiable elements of the base surface for the target well. We used multiple base targets such as a mountainous, grassy environment, a snowy mountain environment, and a flat beach landscape. Moreover, all of the viewers had similar or corresponding numbers of elements added to that base surface, and those results tell us how the currency will perform over the forecast period according to the rules of our experimental design. In our studies, there are a possibility of up to 11 elements that can be placed in a target using CGI software 5 years into the future. And our remote viewers are describing what the target looks like in 5 years after it is assembled using CGI software. The rules of how those elements are employed in the target creation process exist now, and those rules are tied to how the currency performs during the forecast period. So, when our viewers describe what the target looks like in the future, we know how the currency performs. For CICO 22, our viewers described the future target as having 3, 5, and 5 additional elements out of the 11 possible elements that are added to the base target. Normally, targets which have 3 or 4 added elements are good indicators of positive growth. Initially, We utilized an aggregated version of temperature probe analysis for this CICO. Temperature probe analysis is normally used to obtain direction indicators for specific timelines, such as week to week, month to month, or even year to year. The aggregation method helps us centralize the timeline measurements so that we have one measure for the entire forecast period, rather than week to week or year to year, and so on. This tends to increase the accuracy of the temperature probe analysis, and it allows us to obtain an independent measure for the aggregate CICO change. We can then compare this with the measure obtained using complexity analysis. For CICO 22, the aggregated temperature probe analysis helps us interpret the complexity analysis. More specifically, there are 24 measures for temperature that were mapped to changes in adoption for this currency. Of the 25 measures for temperature, 20 are positive and only 4 are negative. If you weigh these numbers by their actually perceived temperatures, then the numbers are 41 positive and only 7 negative. Thus, the aggregate temperature probe analysis corresponds well enough with the complexity analysis to indicate that CICO 22 does find a significant user base with a rise in adoption for a period of time over the next 5 years. We were happy to find overall positive growth with CICO 22, but unfortunately the negative indicators for CICOs 21 and 23 seemed to indicate that those CICOs may not be the best investment across the duration of the forecast. Now, for a numerical comparison with respect to our other CICO projects, if we average the number of elements perceived by each viewer and divide that by the total possible elements for a target, we get the proportion of total possible elements that the viewer perceives. Then we can average that proportion across all viewers to get an overall index for the currency that ranges from 0 to 1. An index number of 1 would mean that the viewers perceived every possible element that could be used in the forecast, and that means that a currency would be very popular and be adopted by an exceptionally large community. An index number of 0 would mean the opposite, which is that the viewers perceived no additional elements over and above the base surface, which would also mean that the currency would be expected to perform quite badly in terms of adoption. For our CICO 1 currency, that index number is 0.66. For CICO 2, that index number is 0.725. For CICO 3, that index number is 0.575. And for CICO 4, that is 0.567. For CICO 6, that index number is 0.389. For CICO 9, that index number is 0.472. For CICO 11, it is 0.413. For CICO 14, that is 0.35. CICO 15, 0.444. CICO 16, 0.35. CICO 17, 0.392. CICO 19, 0.45. CICO 20, 0.35. CICO 22, 0.433. When combined with these positive indicators for aggregate temperature probe analysis, this indicates an interesting result for CICO 22 between now, 2021, and 2026, with a potential downturn at the end of the forecast around 2026. So, our remote viewing results is positive for CICO 22 in terms of adoption. This does not guarantee that the currency will perform well over the next 5 years, but given that we now have multiple remote viewing sessions done by very experienced remote viewers that all indicate that the currency's future performance is strong, this suggests that the future timelines for this currency are generally positive. To give my own thought with respect to myself and my own personal investment criteria, it seems that paying attention to how I might involve myself in the ecosystem of CICO 22 seems to be a statistically safe bet. Again, at least for myself. But remember, this is not day trading where you buy in the morning and sell in the afternoon, and the exact timing of an upward or downward movement needs to be known down to the hour or the minute. Remind yourself that this is a 5-year forecast. As mentioned briefly before, CICOs 21 and 23 in comparison did not yield strong indicators of overall positive growth or a significant rise in adoption during the forecast period, like CICO 22 did. So, the results for CICO 21 and 23 are negative from our perspective. And remember, our disclaimer, no one at Farsight is a licensed financial advisor, so anything that anyone does at Farsight that relates to the use of remote viewing to predict financial or economic outcomes of any type, including the performance, however defined, or selling prices of cryptocurrencies, stocks, commodities, or anything else is done for entertainment and educational purposes only. Everyone is doing investments at their own risk. These are experiments in remote viewing, and there are no guarantees or warranties being made, either expressed or implied. Nonetheless, these efforts are truly interesting on a grand scale, and we at Farsight believe that after we do this for a while, it will be impossible for anyone to ignore the reality of remote viewing. As we have said in the past, may you follow your own intuitions, make wise investment decisions, and become rich. Thank you for supporting our efforts at Farsight. Together, we will change the world for the better. I am Aziz Brown from Farsight.